For 25 years, the world believed it knew the story of Princess Diana, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the tragic end. But what if the most explosive chapter was buried deeper than anyone imagined? Tonight, a revelation emerges not from tabloids or conspiracy theorists, but from her own sons. And what they confirm threatens to unravel everything we thought we knew about love, loyalty, and the royal family itself. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The day she died, the world did not simply mourn it shattered. Crowds gathered in silence that felt almost sacred, clutching flowers as though they were apologies offered too late. Strangers wept openly. Nations paused. For a fleeting moment, titles and traditions meant nothing. Grief stripped everything bare. Diana was no longer a princess bound by protocol. She was a mother, a symbol of wounded grace, a woman whose pain had unfolded in front of cameras that never blinked. Yet even as the candles flickered outside palace gates, whispers began to coil beneath the surface of public sorrow. There were questions no one dared ask too loudly. Questions about who she truly loved. Questions about who loved her back. And questions about whether her heart had found refuge in someone the palace could never accept. For decades, the rumor lingered like a shadow that refused to disappear, the suggestion of a secret lover whose presence was fiercely guarded and quietly erased. It was never confirmed, never fully denied. Dismissed as gossip by officials, brushed aside as fantasy by loyalists, it survived anyway. In private conversations and carefully worded interviews, hints slipped through. A name left unspoken, a relationship reduced to a footnote. The monarchy, built on the strength of image and endurance, maintained its polished exterior. But behind closed doors, there were fractures. Publicly, Diana was portrayed as the tragic figure navigating a failed marriage beneath the weight of tradition. Privately, some believed she had found a connection that threatened the carefully arranged order of royal expectation. The contrast was stark: devotion versus duty, freedom versus formality, and somewhere in that tension, a truth was quietly suffocated. Prince William and Prince Harry grew up inside that contradiction. They were children when the world turned their mother into a saint and a spectacle at the same time. As they matured, so did their understanding of the forces that shaped her life, and perhaps silenced parts of it. For years, they protected her memory with careful words, choosing diplomacy over disruption. They carried their grief with discipline. But time has a way of loosening what was once tightly sealed. Recent developments, subtle yet seismic, have placed them in an impossible position. Evidence resurfacing, private conversations revisited, a narrative once controlled now slipping beyond the palace's grasp. And suddenly, silence feels less like loyalty and more like complicity. What they are beginning to acknowledge does not rewrite history, it deepens it. It suggests that behind the fairy tale image and the carefully managed scandals was a woman still searching for genuine love, even when the world insisted on defining her by loss. If their confirmations hold, then the monarchy's greatest strength, its ability to endure, may also be its greatest vulnerability. Because when heirs to the throne begin to question the past, they do more than revisit old wounds. They reopen them. And in doing so, they force an institution built on secrecy to confront the cost of survival. But before the truth could surface, it was carefully buried layer by layer inside a palace built on secrecy and survival. The world saw a princess, graceful, radiant, untouchable. But behind palace walls, Diana was fighting a war no one could see. Loneliness, betrayal, and a desperate longing for genuine love shaped her private world. And somewhere within that emotional storm, a connection formed, one so powerful, it would remain hidden for decades, until now. From the outside, her life looked like a fairy tale sealed in gold. Applause followed her name. Crowds leaned forward just to catch a glimpse of her smile. She shook hands with the sick, knelt beside the forgotten, and spoke with a softness that made strangers feel understood. The public saw compassion. They saw confidence. What they did not see was the silence that greeted her at the end of the day, the heavy quiet of rooms too large and conversations too careful. Royal life offered prestige, but it demanded obedience. It offered admiration, but it restricted authenticity. And for a young woman still discovering who she was, that contradiction slowly became unbearable. Her marriage, once celebrated as destiny, hardened into something colder. Duty replaced intimacy. Appearances replaced honesty. The cracks were not sudden. They spread gradually, thin lines of disappointment running through the foundation of what was meant to be forever. She tried to adapt. She tried to belong. But emotional distance cannot be disguised forever, no matter how polished the performance. The world debated protocol in succession, while Diana wrestled with rejection that cut far deeper than headlines could capture. Inside that union, she felt unseen, unheard, and in the spaces left by that absence, doubt crept in. It is easy to reduce her story to scandal, affairs, confessions, recorded conversations. But that simplification misses the truth. What she sought was not rebellion, it was relief. Relief from a constant negotiation between who she was expected to be and who she truly felt herself becoming. She longed for a place where her laughter was not measured, where her fears were not weaponized, where her heart did not feel like a liability. That yearning did not make her reckless. It made her human, and so, quietly, almost imperceptibly, a new presence entered her orbit, not with grand declarations or reckless exposure, but with understanding, with patience, with a listening ear in a world that often spoke over her. This figure, still wrapped in mystery, did not represent escape from responsibility. Instead, he offered something far more radical within the royal framework: emotional refuge. Someone who saw the woman beneath the title, someone who recognized the exhaustion behind the grace. In private exchanges, Diana found affirmation she had been starved of for years. Conversations deepened, trust strengthened, and for the first time in a long time, hope flickered. To the institution, such vulnerability was dangerous. To Diana, it was survival. Because when a person is deprived of emotional safety, even the smallest gesture of understanding can feel revolutionary. This connection was not about spectacle. It was about steadiness. Not about defiance, but about dignity. And as her confidence began to quietly rebuild, so too did the stakes. The more authentic she felt, the more fragile the illusions surrounding her became. The monarchy thrived on control. Diana was beginning to rediscover freedom. And as Diana searched for something real in a world of illusion, one relationship began to change everything. He was there but never acknowledged. Seen in fragments, whispered about in hushed conversations, and erased from official records. For years, his identity remained one of the monarchy's most guarded secrets, but clues were always hiding in plain sight. Now, those fragments are aligning, and the silhouette of Diana's secret lover is, finally, beginning to take form. In the early years of her unraveling marriage, there were fleeting mentions of a man who seemed to exist only at the edges of official narratives, a name omitted from guest lists, a presence unaccounted for in travelogues. Staff members recalled brief encounters that were later dismissed as misunderstandings. Security patterns shifted without explanation. Movements were adjusted at the last minute. And while none of it appeared explosive on its own, together they formed a quiet pattern, subtle, deliberate, almost surgical. Someone was being shielded, or perhaps hidden. Observers at the time sensed something unusual but lacked the language to define it. A brief exchange here, a shared glance there. Nothing overt, nothing reckless. Yet beneath the rigid choreography of royal life, an undercurrent pulsed. Diana's schedule, often dictated down to the minute, occasionally bent in ways that defied protocol. Official statements would place her in one location, while eyewitness accounts hinted at detours never publicly addressed. The monarchy insisted on order, but within that order, small disruptions kept surfacing, like cracks beneath polished marble. Then there were the letters, carefully worded notes that spoke of trust and gratitude without naming their recipient, phrases that carried weight far beyond friendship. In interviews, Diana sometimes paused before answering certain questions, her tone shifting almost imperceptibly when discussing loyalty and betrayal. Insiders would later describe conversations that felt coded, layered with meaning only a select few could decipher. It was not the language of scandal. It was the language of caution, as if even in private, she knew she was navigating dangerous territory. What made the mystery even more compelling was his proximity to power. He was not an outsider chasing fame. He operated within Rehab, of the institution itself, That closeness made him both invisible and vulnerable. The palace machine is designed to detect threats from the outside, but what happens when the perceived threat exists within its own orbit? That question lingered quietly, unanswered. Because if this man was chosen by Diana, then he represented emotional rebellion. But if he was forbidden, then his very existence challenged the monarchy's authority over her personal life. Efforts to contain speculation intensified over time. Stories were softened, timelines refined, certain individuals were reassigned. It was not an overt purge, but a gradual fading, as if the institution believed that silence, sustained long enough, could rewrite reality. And for years, it worked. The public consumed carefully curated narratives, unaware that entire chapters had been redacted. Yet truth has a stubborn quality. It leaves impressions. It echoes in testimonies years later. It resurfaces in archival inconsistencies and forgotten recordings. Now, decades on, those fragments are being re-examined with sharper eyes. Former aides are speaking with fewer filters. Documents once dismissed as trivial are revealing patterns too precise to ignore. The silhouette that once seemed abstract is gaining dimension. Not fully visible yet, but undeniable. And as his outline sharpens, so too does the realization that this was never a fleeting distraction. It was a connection strong enough to warrant protection or suppression. The deeper investigators dig, the clearer it becomes that this mystery was not accidental. It was managed, controlled, strategically minimized, which raises the question that refuses to fade. Was he merely a confidant who offered comfort during chaos, or did his presence threaten something far more significant within the royal framework? Because if Diana's heart aligned with someone outside the script, written for her, then the implications ripple far beyond romance. But secrets like these don't stay hidden forever, especially when they leave traces behind. What if the truth wasn't just hidden but deliberately erased? Documents that vanished, witnesses who suddenly fell silent, footage that was never released. For decades, pieces of Diana's story seemed incomplete, but now, new revelations suggest those missing pieces weren't accidents, they were removed. And what they reveal could shake the foundation of the royal narrative. When investigators began revisiting the archives, they expected faded ink and routine gaps. What they found instead were absence too precise to ignore. Logs with missing dates, correspondence referenced in one file but nowhere to be found in another. Official schedules that skipped hours without explanation. These were not dramatic red flags waving in plain sight. They were subtler than that, surgical omissions buried beneath mountains of routine documentation. The monarchy has always thrived on meticulous record-keeping, which makes the silence within certain folders all the more deafening. Former staff members, once bound by loyalty and fear, have started to speak in careful fragments. Not full confessions, not explosive declarations, but hints. One aide described being instructed to simplify a timeline before it reached the press. Another recalled footage reviewed internally but never broadcast, moments deemed unsuitable for public consumption. A journalist admitted that key quotes from an interview were edited out before publication, softened to preserve stability. Each account alone might sound insignificant. Together, they form a pattern, an invisible hand, shaping what the world was allowed to know. Media coverage over the years reveals its own quiet revisions. Early reports that referenced unnamed companions were gradually reframed as speculative noise. Articles that once questioned inconsistencies were updated, their tone shifting from curiosity to dismissal. Broadcast segments disappeared from public archives without explanation. The official narrative tightened, refined, polished until it gleamed. And in that polished version, complexity vanished. Emotional nuance was reduced to digestible headlines. Anything that hinted at deeper conflict or deeper connection was smoothed away. Within royal circles, the silence became ritual, conversations redirected, inquiries discouraged. Those who asked too many questions found themselves distanced from influence, not exiled, not publicly reprimanded, simply repositioned. It was control through subtlety, protection through omission. The institution did not need dramatic crackdowns. It relied on discipline and tradition. Everyone understood the unspoken rule, stability above all. And if stability required trimming inconvenient truths, then so be it. But the most unsettling revelation is not that records were incomplete. It is that the incompleteness followed a theme. References to certain meetings consistently blurred, mentions of a particular figure repeatedly diluted, emotional details surrounding Diana's final years strategically narrowed, the same shadows appearing again and again, as if someone was carefully redrawing the borders of her story. This was not chaos. It was coordination. And yet suppression has limits, because truth does not only reside in documents and footage, it lives in memory, in glances exchanged behind closed doors, in words overheard by those not meant to hear them. For years, the monarchy managed information with precision, but it could not edit what was witnessed by two boys growing up inside that world. They saw the tension. They felt the shifts in atmosphere. They understood, even as children, that parts of their mother's life were off, spoken about in code. Now, as adults, their reflections carry a weight no archive can erase. The institution may have controlled files, refined headlines, and guided public perception, but it could never fully contain lived experience. And if a coordinated effort existed to protect a dangerous truth, then its greatest vulnerability lies not in paper trails, but in personal recollection. And yet, the most powerful evidence wasn't hidden in files, but in the memories of two young boys who lived through it. They were just children when the world shattered around them, but children remember more than we think. For Prince William and Prince Harry, the truth about their mother wasn't something they discovered, it was something they lived. For years, they carried a silent burden. And now, after decades of restraint, they're ready to speak. Long before the headlines grew loud, before interviews dissected their grief, they felt the tension in quiet rooms and strained conversations. They noticed the pauses, the coded language, the sudden shifts in routine that adults assumed would go unnoticed. Their mother's laughter could fill a space, but so could her sorrow. And they learned, at an early age, how to read both. They saw the exhaustion behind her smile, the determination in her voice when she spoke about love and fairness. They also saw the isolation that followed when doors closed and the world outside stopped clapping. Those moments were never recorded. They were never archived, but they were absorbed quietly, deeply by two boys trying to understand a life far more complicated than the fairy tale presented to them. Trauma does not always announce itself with chaos. Sometimes it settles in slowly, reshaping how memory feels. William, the elder, understood early the weight of expectation. He learned to steady his emotions, to protect not just his mother's image but the institute, ion that defined his future. Harry, younger and more openly restless, felt the cracks differently. Where one internalized, the other questioned. Where one maintained composure, the other wrestled with anger. Neither response was wrong. Both were human. And both were shaped by experiences the public never witnessed, private conversations overheard, glances exchanged between adults that carried meaning too heavy for children. Assurances whispered late at night that things would get better. As they grew older, fragments of understanding sharpened. They began to piece together the contradictions surrounding their mother's life, the gap between public narrative and private truth. They knew there were relationships that mattered to her, connections that offered comfort in ways the palace rarely did. They sensed that certain names were never spoken openly, that certain stories were trimmed before reaching daylight. And more than once, there were moments when one of them came close to saying something that might have unsettled the carefully maintained balance. A comment during an interview, a pause before answering a loaded question, a choice of words that hinted at more than it revealed. But each time, restraint prevailed. Their silence was never ignorance. It was deliberate. It was protection of their mother's dignity, of their own healing, and yes, of the crown they were born into. Loyalty is rarely simple in a family bound by duty. To defend the monarchy often meant softening the truth about the woman who raised them. To defend her meant challenging the very structure that defined their roles. They walked that line for years, careful not to tip too far in either direction. The world interpreted their quiet as acceptance. It was not. It was calculation. It was grief matured into discipline. But discipline has limits, and memory does not fade simply because it is inconvenient. As they entered adulthood, as fathers themselves, their reflections deepened. They understood more clearly what their mother had been searching for, They recognized the courage it took for her to seek authenticity in a system designed to contain it. And slowly, the burden of withholding began to outweigh the comfort of compliance. Because at some point, protecting a legacy begins to feel like preserving a distortion. And what finally pushed them to reconsider that silence was not revenge, nor rebellion. It was the realization that history was hardening around an incomplete story, a story their own memories contradicted, a story that risked turning their mother into a symbol while erasing the woman she truly was. But what finally pushed them to break that silence wasn't just time, it was something far more urgent. It didn't happen in a press conference. There was no grand announcement. Just a quiet moment captured, leaked, and impossible to ignore. A conversation between brothers that was never meant for the world. And within it, a confirmation so powerful, it sent shockwaves through the monarchy. After 25 years, the truth was finally spoken aloud. The exchange was not staged beneath flashing cameras or rehearsed behind palace doors. It unfolded in what should have been a private space, voices low, guarded yet weary. At first, it seemed like nothing more than two brothers revisiting old wounds, grief, pressure, responsibility. But then the tone shifted. A name wasn't spoken outright, yet its presence hovered unmistakably between them. One brother referenced what she found when she felt alone. The other didn't correct him. He didn't deflect. Instead, there was a pause, heavy, deliberate, and then a quiet acknowledgement that what their mother had experienced had been real. Not rumor, not fabrication. Real. How the moment surfaced remains its own mystery. A recording circuable, laid in fragments, stripped of context, yet rich with implication. Analysts dissected every syllable. Royal aides scrambled to downplay its significance. But the damage, or perhaps the liberation, was done. Because what the public heard was not speculation, it was recognition. Both men, in their own restrained way, affirmed the existence of a relationship long buried beneath official narratives. They did not offer scandal, they offered validation. And that validation carried the weight of lived experience. The tension in their voices told its own story. This was not triumph. It was conflict. William's measured cadence suggested caution, a lifetime of training urging him to protect the institution even now. Harry's tone carried urgency, an undercurrent of frustration that had simmered for years. They were aligned in truth, yet divided in approach, one seeking stability, the other demanding clarity. But on this point, on the reality of their mother's emotional refuge, they stood together. That unity made the moment explosive. For decades, the monarchy relied on ambiguity. It thrived on the absence of confirmation. As long as nothing was admitted, nothing had to be addressed. But acknowledgement changes everything. When heirs to the throne validate what was once dismissed as gossip, the narrative fractures. The carefully maintained illusion begins to erode. And what replaces it is far more human, far more complicated. A princess who loved beyond expectation. A system that struggled to contain her. Sons who knew more than they were ever allowed to say. The emotional gravity of their admission cannot be overstated. They were not merely revisiting the past, they were reclaiming it. In confirming that their mother sought and found comfort outside the rigid boundaries imposed on her, they were also confronting the structure that confined her. It was an act of remembrance, yes, but it was also an act of quiet defiance. Because truth, once spoken, cannot be easily returned to silence. Palace insiders reportedly reacted with unease. Not outrage unease. The kind that surfaces when a long-protected story begins to unravel. Damage control strategies were considered. Statements were drafted. Yet none could fully erase what had already been heard. The brothers had crossed an invisible line. They had moved from implication to affirmation. And in doing so, they transformed years of whispered speculation into undeniable reality. This was the turning point. Not because it exposed scandal, but because it restored complexity to a woman flattened by myth. It forced the monarchy to confront a chapter it had long attempted to minimize, and it shifted the power dynamic from institution to individual memory. And as the truth finally emerged, one question remained: who was the man behind it all? Not a stranger, not a fleeting figure, but someone far closer than anyone ever imagined. The identity of Diana's secret lover isn't just surprising, it's explosive. A name tied to power, influence, and a connection that changes everything. As William and Harry's confirmation takes shape, the world is forced to confront a truth that was never meant to be known. For years, speculation painted him as an outsider, someone distant from the machinery of monarchy, safely removed from its inner workings. That assumption offered comfort. It kept the narrative contained. But the emerging truth points somewhere far more unsettling. The man at the center of this long-buried chapter was not orbiting the institution from afar. He was operating within its gravitational pull, trusted, vetted, present in spaces where loyalty was presumed, not questioned. His proximity was not accidental, it was structural. When his name first began circulating behind closed doors, disbelief followed. How cool. Someone so embedded within royal and political circles form a bond so deeply personal with the most scrutinized woman in the world. That is precisely what makes the revelation seismic. This was not a reckless romance played out in hidden corners. It was an emotional alliance forged in an environment where vulnerability was a liability. Their connection challenged more than marital expectations. It disrupted hierarchies, blurred professional boundaries, and unsettled alliances built on discretion. Those who now re-examine past events through this lens are seeing them differently. Sudden transfers once described as routine adjustments take on new meaning. Strategic distancing between certain departments appears less coincidental. Public appearances where tension flickered beneath composure feel charged in retrospect. Even political undertones surface as the implications ripple beyond palace walls. Because when intimacy intersects with power, the consequences extend far beyond personal betrayal. They threaten credibility, stability, control. For Diana, the relationship represented refuge. For the institution, it represented risk. That duality is what makes the story so emotionally complex. She was not seeking upheaval, she was seeking understanding. Yet the man who offered it was tied to systems designed to contain her. That contradiction intensified everything. Every conversation carried stakes. Every meeting required calculation. The secrecy was not fueled by scandal alone. It was fueled by survival on both sides. Exposure would not have simply embarrassed the monarchy. It could have fractured trust at the highest levels. William and Harry's acknowledgement reframes this connection entirely. It suggests that what their mother experienced was not impulsive, but profound. That this man was not a footnote, but a chapter. And that the silence surrounding him was not a tale, but orchestrated. Betrayal becomes layered here, not only within a marriage, but within an institution that may have known more than it admitted. Emotional complexity deepens when one considers the burden carried by everyone involved, affection intertwined with duty, compassion entangled with consequence. Had this truth surfaced earlier, history might have shifted. Public sympathy could have evolved into public confrontation. Political dynamics might have been strained. Decisions made in those final years may have unfolded differently under the weight of transparency. Instead, the narrative remained controlled, curated into something safer. But safe does not mean complete. And now, completeness is forcing a reckoning. The explosive nature of his identity lies not merely in who he is, but in what he represents: a bridge between Diana's private longing and the rigid framework that defined her public existence. A symbol of how deeply personal vulnerability can collide with institutional preservation. And as the layers continue to peel back, it becomes clear that this was never just a love story hidden from view. It was a fault line running beneath the monarchy itself. But the revelation doesn't end with identity. It ignites a storm that could reshape the monarchy forever. The palace walls have stood for centuries, but every structure has its breaking point. This revelation doesn't just expose a secret, it threatens the very image the monarchy has fought to preserve. As the world reacts, cracks begin to show. And behind closed doors, a quiet crisis unfolds, one that could redefine the future of the royal family. Institutions like the monarchy survive on perception, continuity, stability, the belief that tradition outweighs turbulence. But when a long-suppressed truth erupts into public consciousness, perception shifts overnight. What was once dismissed as rumor is now ank, orid in confirmation. And that confirmation carries institutional consequences. Because this is no longer about a private relationship, it is about narrative control. For decades, the Crown curated a version of events that maintained order. Now, that version is under siege. Inside royal circles, tension simmers beneath composed expressions. Senior figures are said to be divided not necessarily over the facts, but over the response. Some urge restraint, believing silence will allow the storm to pass. Others warn that silence now reads as evasion. The younger generation, shaped by transparency and media immediacy, understands that ambiguity no longer protects authority, it weakens it. That generational fault line intensifies the strain. The monarchy is not just confronting an old secret, it is confronting its own evolution. Beyond palace gates, the reaction is swift and unforgiving. Global headlines dissect every implication. Commentators question what else may have been softened, reframed, or withheld. Public trust, once rooted in reverence, feels more conditional than ever. Supporters defend the institution's right to privacy. Critics argue that privacy became suppression. The debate is no longer confined to tabloids. It is unfolding in parliaments, across social platforms, and in living rooms worldwide. The monarchy, once insulated by ceremony, now faces scrutiny in real time. Political undertones add another layer of complexity. The identified figure's proximity to influence blurs the line between personal secrecy and institutional accountability. Questions ripple outward. Were decisions affected? Were alliances shaped by knowledge, kept from the public? Even if no direct misconduct occurred, the perception of entanglement destabilizes confidence. In modern constitutional frameworks, perception can be as powerful as proof, and perception is shifting rapidly. Within the family itself, the emotional stakes are profound. Loyalty to legacy collides with loyalty to truth. Some members fear that acknowledging deeper layers of the past invites endless re-examination. Others believe that confronting history is the only path to legitimacy in a changing world. Private conversations grow more urgent. Advisors draft strategies that attempt to balance dignity with damage control. Yet beneath every carefully chosen word lies a shared understanding. This moment cannot be undone. The monarchy has weathered abdications, scandals, and cultural revolutions. It has adapted before, but adaptation requires clarity, and clarity demands acknowledgement. The danger now is not exposure, it is erosion. Erosion of confidence, erosion of mystique, erosion of the quiet authority that once felt unshakable. Stability, once assumed, now feels negotiable. And still, amid the turmoil, another reality emerges. The revelation humanizes what was once mythologized. It reframes a princess, not as a symbol trapped in tragedy, but as a woman navigating love and constraint within impossible parameters. That humanity resonates with a public increasingly skeptical of polished perfection. Ironically, the same truth that threatens institutional image may deepen emotional connection. Yet uncertainty lingers like a gathering storm. Will transparency strengthen the crown by aligning it with modern values? Or will it unravel threads too tightly woven to withstand daylight? The monarchy stands at a crossroads caught between preservation and transformation. And yet, beneath the chaos, one final question lingers. Was this truth meant to set them free or destroy everything? In the end, this isn't just a story about secrets. It's a story about love, loss, and the cost of silence. Diana's truth has finally surfaced, but its impact will echo for generations. And as the world looks back, one thigh engine becomes clear. Some stories are too powerful to stay buried, no matter how hard they try. For years, her life was reduced to headlines: betrayal, scandal, tragedy. But this revelation reshapes the frame. It reveals not just a princess caught in a broken system, but a woman searching relentlessly for something real. Her journey was never about defiance for its own sake. It was about survival, about preserving a sense of self inside an institution that often demanded surrender. The confirmation of her hidden love does not tarnish her legacy, it deepens it. It reminds us that beneath the crown was a beating heart, vulnerable and brave in equal measure. Through this new lens, her choices feel less reckless and more human. She was not chasing chaos, she was reaching for connection. The monarchy presented permanence, tradition, and spectacle, but Diana longed for warmth, understanding, and emotional safety. That longing does not weaken her story, it strengthens it, because it exposes the impossible balance she was asked to maintain, to be both symbol and soul, icon and individual. And that tension, she paid a price few truly understood. For William and Harry, this chapter is not simply historical, it is deeply personal. The truth they finally allowed into the light carries both relief and consequence. Relief, because silence can feel like a second loss. Consequence, because speaking reshapes relationships inside and outside the palace walls. Whether this revelation brings healing or further distance between them remains uncertain. Shared acknowledgement can unite. It can also reopen wounds long sealed by necessity. But what is undeniable is that their mother's full humanity now stands at the center of the narrative, no longer confined to carefully edited remembrance. The public, too, must reconcile with a more complex memory. It is easier to mourn a myth than to understand a woman. Yet understanding is where legacy truly lives. Diana's compassion, her empathy, her instinct to reach across barriers, those qualities were not born from perfection. They were forged in struggle, in loneliness, in a hunger for authenticity that refused to disappear. And perhaps that is why her story continues to resonate so powerfully, because it mirrors a universal truth. Even in gilded cages, the human spirit longs to be seen. Still, questions linger in the shadows. What other layers remain undiscovered? How will this shift in perspective alter the monarchy's path forward? Institutions endure by adapting, but adaptation is never painless. The crown stands steadier than many expected, yet subtly transformed. And somewhere within that transformation lies Diana's enduring influence, a reminder that vulnerability can outlast protocol. That truth can outlive suppression. There is closure here, but not certainty. Reflection, but not finality. Her story, once fragmented, now feels fuller yet still touched by mystery. And maybe that is fitting. Because legends rarely conclude with neat endings. They ripple outward, shaping hearts and histories long after the headlines fade. Because even now, as the truth stands revealed, its full impact is only just beginning to unfold. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.